So hello everyone, welcome to the third tutorial of the series. So in this tutorial, what we are going to do is basically if you go into the website and check out that we have this device change functionality over here. When we press Apple, we see an Apple phone, and then on the Android, we see an Android phone, and on the tablet, we have an iPad. So this is what we are going to create in this video tutorial. So let's get started. So in this video, what we are going to do is we're going to use provider for state management. We're going to use another package for creating these 3D buttons. So this is where we left off in the previous video. Notice that we added these clouds and this gradient in the background in the previous video, right? Okay, so we added this phone in the first step, but we haven't really played with this device widget, right? So let's just do that as well. So I'll go into the homepage.dat. As you can see, this is pretty standard. All right. So in the previous video, we added this gradient and this SVG asset. Now let's just do one thing. We have this device frame widget, right? Let's just wrap it with a container. All right. And give it a color. Let's give it red for now. All right. So as you can see it, the container is taking the whole space, right? And when we give it a color, you can see the proper dimensions of the phone. So this is what we are going to use to create the gradient effect we can see in the final version. All right. We are not dealing with it right now. Right now, we are just focused on creating the devices, different devices. All right. I'm just showing it. Okay. I'm just showcasing it to you. Okay. So let's skip this and let's add the packages that we're going to need. Okay, so one step again, how you can add packages, how you traditionally add packages is you copy and paste a line over here, but we don't need to do that. So we can simply run this command flutter pub add provider and hit enter. What this will do is this will add the latest version of provider in a pubspec.yaml. Okay, so we have added provider. Another package that we're going to need is flutter pub add custom button builder. Okay, so that is also done. What this package does is we'll deal with it a little bit later. Right now, let's just set up the provider. So in a lib folder, we're going to create a new folder, right? We're going to create a new folder named providers. Inside the provider folder, we'll add a file. Now the norm to write a dat file is to write it with underscores and lower caps. Okay. We have created a file. Let's just give it a name. To create a provider class, you have to extend it with change notifier. All right. So we have created this provider class. Now what we need to do is we need to add this provider above our material app, right? So for that, what we do is we wrap it with multi-provider. Why we're using multi-provider is because in the future we can have a lot of providers in a single application. So for that, we'll add multi-provider first hand so that we don't have to change this later on. So over here, what will I do? Change notifier. And over here, I'll give the name of the class. Okay, pretty standard stuff. Okay. All right. So now what we need to do is let's head to our home.dat and let's create these buttons. Okay. Now notice every single button has an icon associated to them and are some kind of storing a state, whether they are pressed or not. Okay. So what we need to do for that is we'll create a model. Okay. So let's just create another folder inside the lib file. So let's just give it a name device underscore model. All right. So inside this model, what we are going to need is we need this variable. All right. Let me just tell you which variable. Okay, so as you can see, its device frame takes a variable. What is the type of the variable? Device info. So we'll need to use this inside our model. Okay, another thing we need is icon data, because we're going to create this icon, right? This is an Android icon, this is an Apple icon, and this is some other icon. So we need to store that information as well. So let's just import these as well. and these should be required. Okay. Okay. Okay, this is done. Now what we need to do is we need to create a list with these 3 icons. Okay, so I'll create another folder named const. This const folder will contain all the constants. Okay, I'll simply name the file data.dart. Inside this I'll create a list of the type device model. Inside this I'll create a list of the type device model, and let's just initiate all the devices. Device model, what will be the data? First of all, we'll need to add an Android phone, right? So I thought this OnePlus 8 Pro looked really good, so I'll add that. So I'll go devices.android.oneplus 8 Pro. But this this should be inside the device. Okay, in the icon, what we need to do is icons.android. Let's just import this material.art as well. Okay, so we have done that. Let's paste it 3 times, and over here let's change Apple, and in the devices I'll go devices.ios.iPhone 13. Okay, over here also what I'll do is I'll add an icon of tablet, and over here what will I do is devices.ios.ipad. We have this list of devices. So now what we need to do is we need to create a widget in the home page that can basically change the devices. All right, as you can see is that these are the buttons that we need to create. So what are we going to do is we'll go inside the homepage.dart. Okay, so as you can see, yes, we currently have a stack. Let's just remove this unnecessary container. We have a stack. The first layer of the stack is this gradient, and then on top of that we have a SVG asset, and then we have the device itself. Now we need to wrap this device with the column. Okay, let's just give it some space on the top, because as you can see right now it's just touching the top, right? Let's just give it 10 pixels. All right, and okay, over here also let's just add 10 more pixels. And now as if we just restart it, as you can see it's not taking the full height, right? Why? Because we have added a column, and now we need to give it a height. Okay, so for giving it a height, I'll wrap it with a sized box. Size.height. All right, you can still see it is overflowing by 20 pixels. Why is that? Because we've given a size box of height 10 over here and 10 over here. That is why it is overflowing by 20 exact pixels. So what I'll do is I'll just subtract 100 pixels from the height. Why? Because I want to give it like proper, proper space. All right, this is looking somewhat good. Now what we'll do is, first of all, we need to make it centered as well, right? So what we'll do is in the column we'll write main axis alignment dot center, and now this is centered. Okay, now we need to add that these buttons. So let's just do that as well. Now the reason why I created a list for them is because we don't need to manually write the code for every single button again and again, right? These are pretty standard buttons, so we'll just use list dot generate devices dot length, and over here I'll create my button, custom button. Let's just Flutter pubget. Alright, this is done, and On pressed, I'll give it null right now. Right now we just focus on creating the UI. Okay, so if we search this package on pubdev, basically I have created this package. So I'm just giving you an overview of the package, what this package can do. All right, so as you can see, I've added this simple example. So we need to use a property called pressed. If we pass in the property pressed, what it'll do is it'll kind of be like disabled, right? It'll be 3D but disabled. All right, so this is what we need to use right now. Just create the widget. I'll show you all these properties as well. First of all, I'll create is 3D is equal to true. I'll give it a child which will center, and inside the child I'll add an icon, devices dot index dot icon dot data. So let's just see what is the output that we get. So we made a mistake, added them inside a column, right? So we need to change that as well. We'll wrap this with a row. We'll just cut this all list.generate and create a row and paste it inside. Okay, you can see that we have these 3 buttons at least. So now let's just add some spacing between them. I'll add space around. So you can see the buttons are created. Let's just give it a background color as well. What is the color that we have given in the website? Background color is black. So I'll give it a background color of black. Now as you can see it, we have this okay, the icon color is also black right now, so you can't see the icon, but you can see this weird thing going on in the like border, right? So what we why is that? Because we have set the property of s3d to true. If we set it to false, it is a simple button. All right, so if we set s3d to true, we have an option to give a shadow color as well. So to shadow color, I'll give it a color of white. All right, let's just also change the color of the icon. All right, now you can see the icons, right? But nothing is happening. This isn't animating, right? Like over here we see the button is going down. So to animate it, we'll pass in the property animate true. Let's just do one thing and hot restart it. Okay, so now there's another error with this package. There's another thing that this package is warning. If you set the property of animate to true, you also need to pass in the height. Otherwise it'll throw an error. Okay, so we'll give it an height. We'll give it an height of 38. And similarly, we'll also give it a width of 38. Why? Because we also, you'll see that in just a minute. Okay, so now you can see it is animating, right? So we'll also give it a border radius now, and the button is circulars. Okay, the button is also animating, right? So we have kind of created what we wanted on the website. The colors are a bit different. You can choose that to your liking. Not an issue. Now what we need to do is we need to enable the on tap functionality over here. Okay, I'll show you another thing with this package. There's an option called pressed. If we passed pressed, what will happen? You see, all the buttons are pressed and disabled right now. Okay, the buttons are pressed and disabled. If we pass on not pressed, these buttons are not disabled. These buttons are working exactly the way they should be, right? So you understand what is happening. We just need to save the index of where the button is on the list, and we can save that in the provider. And using that index, we'll pass on this property to the button, that whether the button should be pressed or unpressed. So in the provider, what we'll do is I'll create a variable. So in the provider, what I'll do is I'll create a device parameter as well, because we need to change this device as well, right? So I'll open the provider, I'll create the first variable over here. What is the type of the variable? Device info. Why? Because we need to change the device, right? I'll give it a name of current device. The default device that I want to be selected is iPhone 13. Okay. Now I'll create a function, change selected device. What this will do is take a device info as a parameter and change the current device and notify listeners. This function, now what we can do is we'll just simply copy this function and go to the home page, right? Let's just rerun the application once again. All right, this is what we have till now, right? Now what we need to do is on the tap of this button, we'll change the device. We have the device info saved inside the list, right? Which is used to create this widget. So on press of this widget, what we can do is, first of all, let's create the instance of provider. So basically to use the provider class, we have to create an instance. Okay, how do we create an instance? Name of the class and then a variable name which you want, and then provider dot of name of the class again, context, listen false. What this listen false basically does is it tells that whenever there is a change in the provider, you don't need to rebuild the entire widget. All right, whenever we need to rebuild a single widget, we'll call the notify listener. You don't need to listen to any changes. Now what I need to do is I'll just simply call current state, or what is the name of the function that we copied already. This is the name of the function. Now we need to pass the argument of device info, right? Where do we get the device info? We have a list called devices, which is basically used to create this list, index.device. All right. So now the device will be changed. All right. So now this device is being changed, but is not being showcased in the UI. Why? Because we have this static variable over here. This also we need to change to current state dot current device. Now again, it'll have no effect because we need to rebuild this device frame widget as well whenever the notify listener is being called. How do we tell this widget to be rebuilt, right? There's a widget called selector inside the provider. Okay, so we need to rebuild two widgets. First is this bottom widget as well, because we need to tell that this is being pressed right now. So just change the state. Second widget that we need to rebuild is this device itself. First, let's add a consumer over here. All right. So if you have been using provider, you know what a consumer is. So I'll use consumer, and consumer takes a class of the provider, and then in the builder there's context, and then I don't need to use just two variables. Basically the first variable is the instance of provider itself. We have already created a global instance of the provider inside the class, so we don't need to do that again. All right, so now if we just reload the application, let's restart the application. It is restarted, and now if we select Android, you can see that the widget is being changed, the device frame is being changed, but the buttons and the buttons are not being changed. So for that, what we can do is we'll just wrap this custom button inside a selector. We can wrap this in the same way in the consumer as well, but I want to teach you something new, the selector. All right, so what the selector does is, I'll do one thing. I'll first wrap it inside a builder and then change the name of the builder to selector. And again, like a consumer, the selector also takes the class. Now it takes a new property called selector. Let's take context and provider. Provider dot current. Now we need to define it with two values. Okay, first is the class of the provider, and second is variable type that it needs to look out for. So I'll write device info, because the device info is the type of variable that we want to look, right? Now what the selector basically does is it does not rebuild every time the notify listener is being called up. It rebuilds only and only when this variable is being changed. The value of this variable is changed. Now, as we don't need to rebuild this whenever the provider will call notify listener, we are wrapping this inside the selector. So now we have wrapped it. It will be rebuilt, but we also need to tell this widget as well that when do you have to change the state. So how do we do that? As I've told earlier, if we pass in pressed, all the widgets, all these buttons will be disabled. And if we pass in not pressed, they will be they'll start acting like the way before. Okay. So now what we need to do is we'll use the instance of the provider and use the current device. We'll compare this value with the value that we have at this instance. The value at this instance is coming from devices index dot device. If they match, we want the button to be disabled. Okay. And if that doesn't match, we want it to be not disabled. Okay. So now as you can see it, we are in the business. The buttons are working absolutely fine. So this is where the step 3 of the video ends. We have created this device frame widget. We have changed its value. We have used provider for state management. We have learned a new kind of widget called selector and consumer. I want you to play around with the UI and try some new things, and I will see you in the step 4 of the video. All right, see you.